Let's go to Nick in New Jersey. Nick, you're on the air. Welcome.
Hey, this is my first time calling.
Welcome.
I heard Mr. Chapman speak, and it makes me sad to know that the Justice Department, the CIA, and FBI, just who's running those damn companies, you know? And I was in that march when we went down to Washington, D.C., and all of these buildings were on the same street, and if I had a paper and pencil, I would have put signs up, for sale, for rent, out of business, bank sale. You know what I mean? Those buildings are right out there, right on the corner.
Well, that's what tyranny is. Well, that's what tyranny is. It's when criminal interests come in, get control of your government, and start robbing you. And it happens everywhere else on the planet. It's happening here. We better grow up and admit it and tell these people, stop it, and start bringing them to justice, because they're not going to quit until we grow a backbone. Bob Chapman.
That's the way to do it, and that's why we're getting the word out, and that's why you're going to Washington and letting them know that you don't agree with what's going on. They had that march on Thursday. It appeared in none of the major media.
Except for them calling them racist. It had nothing to do with race. Right. They don't want government-run health care. You know, they can't run cash for clunkers. They can't run this. And that's being nice to them. Nick, good to hear from you.
How do they think they're going to get away with that? Because it's a non sequitur. It has nothing to do with what they were doing. I mean, stupid. I'm talking about the government and the media and saying those things.
It's amazing. Let's talk to Arnold in California. Arnold, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Alex. Thank you so much for having me on. First-time caller. I've been listening to you for a long time. And here's something that I quite don't understand. It seems like the CIA seems to be more connected in doing business outside of the U.S. to hoard all this money in the international trade. And I know that because I'm somewhat connected internationally, and this is what I always hear from the people. Before you can do anything, it seems like you have to give the CIA their cut first.
Bob?
First of all, I don't have first-hand knowledge. Historically, I do. And I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't extorting everybody. It is a criminal organization.
Well, the thing is that I was in the military myself, and I know that every branch of the military has their own intelligence. And it seems like if the CIA is supposedly intelligence outside of the U.S., why do we need them if the military already has their own?
Well, it's a good question. It's something that existed starting in the late 1930s, modeled on MI6. It was OSS. In 1948, it became the Central Intelligence Agency. In 1953, it was brought under the National Security Agency, which was formed that year. So it became part of it. And that same year, the Army Security Agency was formed, and I worked for them. So I worked indirectly with both those organizations, particularly NSA. And so the CIA exists probably so that Wall Street and others can run the opium trade and extort money from people and pull scams like Madoff and the Nugan Hand episode and things like that. I mean, these guys are top criminals.
And there's no doubt that the opium trade founded Skull and Bones. It founded out of OSS CIA. That's in mainline history of the CIA. And you've got all these other compartmentalized federal intelligence groups and international intelligence groups. And there's a lot of good people that work for them, but they're all compartmentalized, doing a separate job that isn't part of the criminal hierarchy. Bob Chapman, we're going to let you go. TheInternationalForecaster.com. People can get a free trial subscription. Your new issue comes out every Saturday. It comes out twice a week. It's always great having you on with us, and I really appreciate you spending time with us today, Bob.
Well, I thank you, and thanks everybody for listening, and I'll be here next week. Bye-bye.
Take care. There he goes. I'm Alex Jones with Infowars.com. We are back live, continuing with your phone calls and covering the news in this hour. So much going on with the economy, joblessness, federal government's reporting at above 10%. How can we have a jobless recovery? There's also been a terrible shooting in Florida at an Orlando office building. At least 8 people shot there. And, of course, you have the 12 dead, 30-plus wounded at Fort Hood with all the security there, showing that nothing can stop a nut except for the Second Amendment. And this female police officer who reportedly shot this individual 4 times and stopped him. Thank God that she didn't wait like they did at Blacksburg and other places. She charged in and took this guy out. So she certainly deserves a lot of praise for that. But they've changed the story so many times. Who knows what's going on? For 6 hours, they said this guy was dead. Then they said he was alive. So our hearts and prayers go out to all of those at Fort Hood and not just in Texas, but in Orlando, Florida. Just terrible. Okay, we're going to break here in a few minutes, but he'll be with us for several segments. And I'm really excited about this interview because I saw the article in McClatchy Newspapers, not this Sunday, but last Sunday, and it dovetailed with Professor Black we've had on, a federal regulator, former federal regulator, and so many, John Perkins, who we've had on, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, all these other insiders talking about Goldman Sachs just really involved in a lot of amazing behavior. But the headline is How Goldman Sachs Secretly Bet on the U.S. Housing Crash. And to go over that is the author, the investigative reporter, award-winning investigative reporter, Greg Gordon. And he's written for some of the biggest newspapers in the country and right now is writing for McClatchy News Service and newspapers. And he's broken a lot of just huge international investigative stories, and maybe later we can talk about a few of those. But to talk about Goldman Sachs secretly bet on U.S. housing crash is Greg Gordon. Greg, thanks for coming on with us.
My great pleasure.
We're about to go to break, but just in a nutshell, this is one of the most in-depth, detailed investigative reports I've seen on the banking industry and Goldman Sachs. This is just an amazing job.
Thank you so much.
In a nutshell, what did you discover?
Well, we wanted to find out how Goldman Sachs got out when nobody else did. And so the first story of the series is really about how Goldman was selling off. At some stage, it became a sell-off. We don't know exactly what that date is, but in 2006 and 2007, Goldman sold $39 billion of bonds, essentially bonds backed by risky mortgages registered in the United States. And these securities, many of them have gone south. And then, in addition, Goldman was peddling more exotic securities, many of which were tied, again, to risky mortgages in the United States offshore. And at the same time, Goldman was betting in these dark markets through devices that are known as credit default swaps, but they're basically insurance-like bets. You're buying a little insurance policy on some specific thing, and they were betting that the housing market would go south and these bonds would all lose value.
So they start quietly dumping on the market AAA-rated paper that was tied to derivatives or exotic instruments, as they're called, and at the same time betting against it after they dumped it. Man, that is amazing.
Well, I want to be clear. They were making bets on similar, but not exactly the same security, but on similar issues. So in other words, they were betting that the housing market's going to go bad, and if the housing market goes bad, all these mortgages are going to go south, or many of the mortgages, because people were going to find themselves underwater in their houses. We know people across the country have homes that are worth less than their mortgages.
Sure. That's been well documented. We're going to break, come back in a long segment, get more into this incredible article, and he's saying it's the first in a series. Can't wait to read more. Stay with us.